The gym at Fort Bragg was a cathedral of grit, sweat, and sheer testosterone. Dumbbells clanked like thunder, treadmills hummed like machinery in a factory, and the smell of sweat and liniment hung thick in the air. Soldiers moved with precision, lifting, throwing, grappling, each one convinced they were untouchable. But the rhythm changed the moment Staff Sergeant Cole Maddox stomped into the room. Cole was broad-shouldered, loud, and notorious in the unit. He had the kind of presence that demanded attention, not because people respected him, but because they feared him. He laughed too loudly, flexed too often, and had a habit of proving himself at the expense of anyone he deemed weaker. And that day, his eyes fell on her. Captain Elise Hartman. She was leaning against the wall near the punching bags, quiet, almost invisible. Her uniform was immaculate, her boots polished, her hair tied back in a simple braid. She wasn't showing off, wasn't trying to be noticed, yet every movement had a careful, controlled grace that made Cole bristle. The whispers had already spread. The captain is a hand-to-hand combat expert, trained at places even the Pentagon won't mention. Cole smirked. He didn't like whispers, he didn't like unknowns, he didn't like her. He slammed his palms together. The sound echoed across the gym, cutting through the grunts, thuds, and clanging metal. "Captain Hartman," he barked, "come over here, let's see what all the fuss is about." The gym froze for a split second. Phones appeared in the soldiers' hands. Eyes widened. Whispers spread like wildfire. None of the soldiers expected her to respond. Some thought she might ignore him. Others wondered if she'd finally show the patience she was famous for. She turned slowly, her gaze meeting his with the calm steadiness of someone who had seen far worse than a cocky sergeant challenging her in a gym. Her eyes were deep, cool, and unwavering, a storm barely contained behind calm waters. She stepped forward. Cole's smirk faltered for the briefest moment. He cracked his knuckles with a loud pop. "Don't worry," he said, "I'll go easy." Elise's voice was quiet, almost too calm to be threatening. "Please don't." That silence made several of the soldiers exchange nervous glances. They didn't know what to expect. Some thought it would be a staged demonstration. Others thought maybe she'd just step aside and save them from embarrassment. But Elise didn't hesitate. She simply stepped onto the mat, the floor creaking beneath her boots. Each step measured, precise. Every eye followed her as if the room had been transformed into a tense theater. Cole lunged first, a confident grin plastered on his face, thinking the fight would be over quickly. But Elise moved like water, smooth, fluid, almost impossible to predict. She sidestepped, caught his wrist, and in one motion redirected his energy so effortlessly that he nearly fell to the ground. The room held its breath. Soldiers' jaws dropped. Whistles of disbelief filled the air. Cole stumbled back, trying to regain control, but before he could even think of countering, Elise's hand was on his chest, her other arm controlling his movements with a precision that felt choreographed, almost surreal. In a blink, she maneuvered him onto the mat. His face hit the floor softly, but his pride shattered noisily. He raised one hand, tapping out in a desperate plea. 3 seconds. 3 seconds had ended the challenge. The gym erupted, not in applause but in stunned silence. Cole lay flat, blinking at the ceiling like he'd just seen a ghost. His humiliation radiated off him, thick and palpable. Soldiers who had seen him dominate in every drill now stared at Elise with awe, confusion, and something resembling fear. Even the most skeptical veterans whispered to each other, unsure whether what they had just witnessed was humanly possible. Elise didn't celebrate, she didn't gloat. She merely stepped back, adjusted her braid, and raised her water bottle to her lips. Calm, collected, controlled. The room seemed to shrink around her, every soldier suddenly hyper-aware that they were in the presence of someone extraordinary. A sergeant approached her cautiously, his voice tinged with both awe and apprehension. "Ma'am, that wasn't just training, that was, I don't even know what to call it." Elise gave a small shrug. "Leverage," she said, her tone flat, almost dismissive. "That's all." The sergeant shook his head. "No, ma'am, that was expertise, the kind you don't just pick up." Her throat tightened. She hated attention, hated the kind of curiosity that dug at old wounds. Memories she'd buried deep beneath years of discipline, and controlled routines flickered briefly. Flashbacks of operations in Kabul, of alleys and explosions, of the faces of people who had never had the chance to fight back. The techniques she used weren't just learned. They were engraved into muscle memory by necessity, forged in fire she didn't want anyone to know existed. But before she could slip away, Cole, red-faced, flustered, and humiliated, shouted across the gym, "A rematch, you didn't even try." A ripple of laughter ran through the soldiers, some jeering, some just amazed. Elise didn't respond. She simply gathered her things, shoulders squared, and walked toward the door, each step deliberate. But then she paused. A cold chill ran down her spine. Someone in the room, someone she couldn't see yet, had noticed something. Not just the move, not just her skill, but her eyes. That momentary flicker of control, focus, and restraint that only those who had truly survived life-and-death situations could understand. It was subtle, but enough to make her pause. Because if that someone connected the dots, if they realized the truth behind those 3 seconds, her carefully constructed anonymity, the one she had fought for years to maintain, could vanish instantly. Her past was supposed to be buried, classified, hidden from every soldier in this gym, and yet in the blink of an eye it had threatened to surface. Elise glanced over her shoulder once more. The room was buzzing with questions. Phones recorded, whispers circulated, eyes followed her every movement. And somewhere in that crowd someone was already thinking, who is she really? And Elise knew that sooner or later, someone would want answers she was never planning to give. Because what she had done in 3 seconds wasn't just a victory over Cole Maddox. It was a signal, a subtle announcement that Captain Elise Hartman was someone the military had underestimated at its peril. And she wasn't done yet. The gym buzzed for hours after the match, but Elise was already gone. She didn't linger to bask in stunned admiration or whispered speculation. The locker room smelled of sweat and disinfectant, yet Elise barely noticed. Her mind was elsewhere, replaying those 3 seconds, the perfect movement, the precise leverage, the way Cole Maddox had collapsed in defeat before she even realized she had finished. It should have been a simple demonstration, but simplicity rarely lasted for her. She had been trained to move faster, strike smarter, and control the chaos around her. And yet, the echoes of Kabul crept uninvited into her thoughts. One moment she was on a mat in Fort Bragg, and the next she could smell the dust, hear the cries, feel the heat of an alley where everything had gone wrong. The faces of her lost team flashed across her mind. 8 names she could still recite in her sleep. 8 friends whose deaths haunted her every decision. Cole Maddox, oblivious to the inner storm she wrestled with, had challenged her in front of dozens of soldiers. And she had dispatched him without effort. 3 seconds. That was all it had taken. She'd done this before, many times, but in Kabul those moves had meant life or death. And yesterday's demonstration, though simple in intention, had reminded her that her past wasn't buried as deeply as she liked to believe. A sergeant approached her cautiously, clipboard in hand, as she grabbed her duffel. "Captain Hartman," he began, voice low, careful, almost reverent. "With all due respect, that wasn't just a takedown. That was something else." Elise stopped, tension stiffening her shoulders. "It's nothing," she said evenly, tying her braid back into a tighter knot. "Just leverage." The sergeant's eyes narrowed. "Leverage doesn't move a man like that in 3 seconds. I've seen dozens of hand-to-hand demonstrations in my career, ma'am. That was expertise. The kind people don't just pick up." Elise didn't answer. She didn't want to, because he didn't understand and no one could. Not here. Not among these soldiers who respected rank but didn't comprehend what it meant to survive when every moment might be your last. She left the gym, every eye still on her. The corridor was fluorescent and sterile, buzzing with the echo of distant machinery and footsteps. Her boots made a soft, deliberate click on the floor. The whispers seemed to follow her, though she refused to look back. Her phone vibrated. A message. She didn't need to look, she already knew who it was. Report to Major General Carver, immediately. Her chest tightened. Carver didn't request meetings. Carver didn't schedule appointments. Carver issued orders. Elise's pulse quickened. She tucked her duffel under her arm and strode to the elevator. Every step was measured, every breath controlled. But inside, a storm was brewing. Memories she had fought to suppress rose with each floor the elevator climbed. When she entered Carver's office, he didn't greet her with the warmth some officers displayed. He was all sharp angles, all focus, his gaze cutting through her as though he could read every line of her soul. He held a tablet in his hand. Without a word, he pressed play. The gym footage from yesterday. Cole Maddox sprawling on the mat in defeat. Soldiers' shocked expressions, phones raised, and then her, calm, perfect, unflinching. But Carver wasn't looking at the takedown, not really. He was looking at her, the eyes, the stance, the way her body had moved with lethal precision. "That's the shadow protocol," he said quietly. Elise stiffened. "No one outside Tier 1 knows that technique," he continued. Her stomach clenched. The shadow protocol wasn't a training exercise. It wasn't part of Army standard combat curriculum. It was a clandestine program, secret, hidden. Only 14 operatives had ever been trained in it. Only 8 survived the rigorous selection process. And she was one of them. Carver set the tablet down. "Unless," he said slowly, "they were part of it." Elise's throat tightened. She had spent years keeping that life buried, separated from the uniform, the chain of command, the daily drills. To be recognized for a technique she had vowed never to use outside classified operations was a breach she hadn't accounted for. Carver leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "I know who you really are, Captain Hartman." Her jaw tightened. She stayed silent. She had never shared her past with anyone, not her friends, not her fellow officers, not even Cole Maddox, who had been foolish enough to challenge her. Her life had been compartmentalized into neat boxes: military service, personal life, memories best left forgotten. "But more importantly," Carver continued, "I know why you left the program." Her pulse jumped. How much did he know? Too much, it seemed. "And I know why your team was wiped out." His eyes held hers with piercing intensity. "The man responsible for their deaths has resurfaced." Her chest tightened. Spectre. The name clawed at her memory like a sharpened knife. He had been the one who had orchestrated the betrayal. He had been the shadow lurking in Kabul when the explosion swallowed her team. She had thought him dead, long dead. Carver slid a folder across the desk. The tab was bold, red, screaming in the otherwise sterile office. "Target reawaken." Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. The photograph inside made her heart seize. Spectre, older, scarred, dangerous, alive. Carver's voice was calm, deadly serious. "I'm reactivating you." Her stomach churned. She had run from this life, buried it under years of discipline, anonymity, and focus on rank and duty. She hadn't wanted to return. She hadn't planned to. "But before that," Carver added, "you need to tell me exactly what happened in Kabul." Elise closed the folder with a snap. Her jaw tightened. There was one detail she had never revealed, one she had buried so deeply even she sometimes doubted it had happened. If Carver discovered it, the consequences could unravel everything. Her breathing was measured, but her mind raced. Images of Kabul assaulted her, gunfire bouncing off walls, the explosion that had swallowed half her team, the betrayal that had left her questioning everything about loyalty and trust. And beneath it all, the one memory she had buried so carefully, hidden even from herself, gnawed relentlessly. The moment she had realized she might have been the one to seal their fate. Her hand brushed against the folder again. The photograph of Spectre felt heavier than it should, alive, planning, hunting, and she would have to confront him. She would have to go back into the shadows she had worked so hard to escape. Outside the window, the base stretched endless and bright, unaware of the storm gathering within one of its own officers. Inside, Elise Hartman sat rigid, eyes locked on the tablet, on Carver, on the photograph, knowing her next move would determine not just her fate, but the fate of everyone she had ever led, trained, and trusted. And somewhere deep in her chest, a cold, precise part of her mind whispered the same words it had whispered for years. Be ready. You've been preparing for this your entire life. But the question lingered, heavier than any orders, any protocol, any command. Could she face Spectre and survive the truth she had fought so hard to bury? The office was silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights. Outside, soldiers trained. Inside, history was about to be rewritten in shadows. Elise barely slept that night. The dormitory at Fort Bragg was silent, save for the distant hum of generators and the occasional clang of boots on metal stairs. Normally, she could shut out the world. Normally, she could block the memories. But last evening's 3-second takedown haunted her in unexpected ways. The simplicity of the move had belied the complexity beneath it. A lifetime of training, of battle, of survival instincts honed under conditions no one else could imagine. And though she had defeated Cole Maddox in mere seconds, the move had drawn attention, dangerous attention. Her phone buzzed on the bedside table, a text from an unlisted number, report to Major General Carver, immediate, no exceptions. Elise's stomach tightened. Carver didn't summon officers for casual matters. His summons were always about matters of grave importance. She pulled on her uniform with mechanical precision, tucked her hair into a tight braid, and grabbed her duffel. Every movement was deliberate, controlled, her face neutral, her mind racing. By the time she reached the general's office, the base felt alien, larger and quieter than usual. Guards gave her a brief nod as if even they understood the seriousness of this meeting. The office door was heavy, reinforced, and intimidating. She stepped inside. Carver was already waiting, standing behind his mahogany desk with a tablet in hand. His expression was unreadable. The hum of the office was punctuated by the quiet click of the tablet screen. Without a word, he pressed play. The footage from yesterday. Cole Maddox sprawling on the mat, soldiers frozen in disbelief, phones raised high. And then her, calm, precise, perfect. But Carver wasn't staring at the gym footage. He was staring at her eyes, at the controlled tension of her body, at the lethal calm she radiated. That, he said quietly, is the shadow protocol. Elise froze. Her stomach clenched. The shadow protocol wasn't just any combat technique. It wasn't even supposed to exist in the military lexicon. It was a clandestine initiative, restricted to Tier 1 operatives. Only 14 had been trained in it, and only 8 had survived. Elise had been one of those 8. Carver continued, his voice deliberate and steady. Unless someone else trained in it is in that room. Her pulse quickened. She had spent years compartmentalizing her past, burying it beneath routine, discipline, and anonymity. And now, a single demonstration had threatened to undo all of it. I know who you are, Captain Hartman, Carver said, leaning forward. His eyes pierced hers. And I know why you left the program. Elise's jaw tightened. Silence was her only defense. She had never shared her past with anyone, not even her closest allies. Her life had been a collection of shadows, carefully separated from her military duties and her peers. But more importantly, Carver said, I know why your team was wiped out, and the man responsible has resurfaced. Her chest tightened. Spectre. He had orchestrated the betrayal in Kabul, disappearing in the chaos while her team had been annihilated. She had assumed he was dead. She had hoped he was dead. And now he was alive. Carver slid a folder toward her, bold red letters screaming on the tab. Target reawaken. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. A photograph, Spectre, older, scarred, dangerous, alive. "I'm reactivating you," Carver said. Elise felt the old storm return, the mixture of fear, adrenaline, and the cold, calculated focus that had kept her alive in countless operations. She had tried to escape this world, bury this life under layers of routine and normalcy. Now, it was demanding her return. "But before that," Carver continued, "you need to tell me exactly what happened in Kabul." Her hands closed into fists. There was a detail she had never revealed, a truth she had buried so deeply even she sometimes doubted it had happened. If Carver discovered it, everything could unravel. Carver's voice broke through her thoughts. "Do you understand why you're being summoned, Captain?" "Yes, sir," she said, her voice steady but her mind racing. "Good, because this isn't about yesterday's takedown. This is about survival, yours and the mission." She swallowed, her throat dry. The memories she had carefully compartmentalized clawed at her consciousness. The Kabul operation had been disastrous, not merely because of Spectre, but because of the betrayal from someone she had trusted, someone within their own ranks. "And you," Carver said, "are the only one with the skills to confront what's coming." Elise's heart thundered. Every instinct screamed at her to resist, to step back, to refuse. But she couldn't. The call was absolute. Carver tapped the folder. "Your team, the ones you lost, their deaths were not in vain. You're being sent to finish what was started, to close the circle." Elise's stomach turned. She had fought hard to separate herself from that past, to avoid the shadows she had left behind. And now, the shadows were calling her back. "The man responsible, Spectre," Carver said slowly. "He knows you. He knows your methods. He knows your weaknesses." Her pulse quickened. The fear was familiar, but so was the resolve that had kept her alive in the past. She had faced death, betrayal, and enemies who should have killed her many times over, and she had survived. "You will be leaving for Washington, D.C. within 72 hours, Carver continued. "There's intel there that only you can act on, and you will not be alone." Elise stiffened. "I work alone," she said, her voice low but firm. Carver's gaze didn't waver. "Not this time. You'll have a partner, someone who can provide critical insight, someone you know." Her breath caught. The last person she had expected or wanted to see was about to step back into her life. Carver pushed a second folder across the desk. Her hands hesitated. The name on the tab sent a cold shiver down her spine. Lieutenant Commander Jason Rudd. Her former teammate, her former closest friend, the man who had vanished just before the Kabul mission collapsed. Carver's voice was steady. "You two will work together to neutralize Spectre. Your mission begins immediately upon arrival in D.C." Elise's jaw tightened. She had not forgiven him for disappearing, not when his absence had contributed to the deaths of her team. And yet, she had no choice. Carver's eyes locked on hers. "You will do this, and you will succeed. The fate of more than your team depends on it." Elise nodded, the weight of responsibility pressing down like iron chains. The past she had tried to bury, the betrayal she had never fully understood, the man she had once trusted implicitly, all of it was converging now. And in the back of her mind, the one question she couldn't shake lingered, cold and insistent. "Can I survive what's coming, or will the shadows finally claim me?" As she left the general's office, the hallway stretched longer than ever. Her steps were precise, measured, but inside, every memory of Kabul, every flash of Spectre's face, every sound of her team's last moments screamed at her. The shadows had found her, and this time there would be no escape. Elise stepped out of Major General Carver's office, the folder containing Jason Rudd's assignment burning against her palm. The hallway lights above flickered intermittently, casting long shadows that seemed to follow her every move. Each step felt heavier than the last. Her uniform, crisp and clean, felt like a cage as memories clawed their way to the surface. She had tried to leave that life behind, tried to bury the ghosts of Kabul deep within her psyche. 8 teammates lost, 8 friends who had trusted her with their lives, and one man specter who had orchestrated the chaos, a shadow she had believed dead. And now somehow he was alive. Worse, she was expected to confront him, armed with nothing but her skill, her wits, and someone she wasn't sure she could trust. Her office was empty when she arrived. The hum of the bass outside was distant and muted, a reminder that life went on, oblivious to the turmoil gathering inside her. She locked the door, leaned against her desk, and allowed herself a moment to breathe. But the moment was short-lived. Memories of that night in Kabul surged like a tidal wave, uninvited and unforgiving. Explosions, smoke, screams, the disintegration of everything she had worked for, the betrayal, the absence of Jason when he should have been there, the 8 lives she had been unable to save. She pressed her palms against her face, trying to shut it all out, but the truth she had buried so carefully refused to stay hidden. She remembered the orders, her orders, the one radio command that, in retrospect, had sealed her team's fate. She had given it in the chaos, thinking it would protect them. But the result had been catastrophic, and she had carried that guilt silently, knowing no one could ever truly understand. A knock at the door pulled her back to the present. "Captain Hartman," the voice was cautious, tentative. She didn't look up. "Come in." Lieutenant Daniels entered, a junior officer with nervous eyes and a clipboard clutched to his chest. "Sir said you'd be handling this personally, ma'am," he said, voice low. "But there's been chatter. Intelligence picked up activity near the DC safe house. Possible Spectre connection." Elise's pulse quickened. The safe house, DC, the mission ahead. How credible, she asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't comfort her. Daniels hesitated. "Hi. Satellite recon confirms movement, masked operatives. Possibly Tier 3 mercs," but he trailed off, uncertainty etched across his face. Elise nodded. "Keep me updated and alert the team. If Spectre here, we can't afford mistakes." The junior officer left, and Elise was alone again with the weight of the impending mission. She ran her hands over her face, rubbed her temples, and tried to focus. But focus was difficult when the ghosts of her past were clawing at her mind. She thought of Jason, Lieutenant Commander Rudd, her former teammate, her friend, or so she had thought. She had trusted him with her life once, but he had disappeared, vanished without a word, leaving her to navigate the chaos in Kabul. 8 lives lost, and he had been absent. How could she trust him now? Yet Carver had assigned him. She had no choice. The mission demanded collaboration, even if her instincts screamed otherwise. She would have to work with him whether she liked it or not. Hours passed, and Elise prepared herself for the next stage. She reviewed maps, intel files, and classified dossiers with meticulous precision. Every movement of Spectre, every known associate, every pattern she could exploit. She worked methodically, calculating risk, preparing contingencies. But preparation could only do so much. The unknown always lurked, ready to exploit a single misstep. Her thoughts drifted again to Kabul, to the faces she had lost, the weight of leadership, the burden of guilt. She had been trained to compartmentalize, to act without hesitation, to make impossible decisions under impossible pressure. But guilt didn't respect training. Memories didn't care about discipline. They surged unbidden, a reminder that even the best prepared operative could be haunted by choices made in the heat of the moment. A soft chime from her secure comlink broke her reverie. She picked it up cautiously, reading the encrypted message. "Captain Hartman, meet me at the North Gate. Alone, bring the flash drive. R." Her breath caught. "R. Jason." Alone, that word hit her like a hammer. Every instinct screamed at her not to go, not to trust, not to engage, and yet the flash drive, information, proof, perhaps answers she had been seeking for years. She packed light, taking only essentials, and slipped out through the side entrance. The base was quiet at this hour, patrolled by guards who respected her rank but didn't know the storm she carried inside. She moved swiftly, her steps silent, calculated, every shadow accounted for. When she reached the North Gate, the street was empty, save for a black sedan parked under a flickering streetlight. The glow illuminated Jason as he stepped out, older, harder, his eyes sharper, colder. She stiffened, instinctively scanning for threats, nodding his stance, the way he carried himself. "Elise," he said quietly, voice low, "before we start, thank you for coming." She didn't respond. Not yet. Not until she assessed the situation. Her eyes flicked to the shadows, noting movement, calculating angles, potential threats, then back to him. He held out a small device, a flash drive. "This contains everything from our old handler, intel meant to be destroyed. I recovered it 2 months ago." Elise's gaze sharpened. "And you think I'll just trust you with this?" Jason's jaw tightened. "You don't have to trust me, just look at it, alone." She weighed her options, the risk, the reward, the consequences. Every fiber of her being screamed at her not to, but the need for the truth, the need to finally understand what had really happened in Kabul, pulled her forward. As she reached for the flash drive, a sudden noise froze her in place, a subtle shift in the darkness, movement. "Someone's here," Jason whispered. Before they could react, a sniper round tore through the air, shattering a nearby lamppost. Sparks flew. Jason lunged, pulling Elise behind a concrete barrier. Her heart raced, adrenaline surging. Another shot, then another. She pressed herself flat, scanning for the shooter. Shadows moved. Figures emerged, masked, armed, precise. "They found us," Jason shouted, urgency slicing through his voice. Elise's instincts took over. She grabbed her sidearm, her movements fluid, controlled, deadly. But the numbers were against them. Another round slammed into the concrete near her feet, sending a shockwave through her bones. Jason shoved her toward the sedan. "Get inside," he barked. She hesitated, every instinct screaming to confront, to fight, to protect. But she realized he was right. Survival came first. As the car door closed, Elise caught a glimpse of the masked operatives converging on their position. The world outside was chaos, but inside the car, a tense silence hung between her and Jason. He looked at her, wounded but determined. "You need to see this," he said, his voice steady. "Everything you think you know about Kabul, it's about to change." Her pulse thundered. Her mind raced. And deep inside, a cold certainty settled over her. Whatever was coming next, there would be no turning back. Because the shadows of her past had finally caught up to her. And the truth was far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. The first rays of dawn filtered through the blinds of the Fort Bragg training facility, cutting lines of gold across the polished floors. Elise stood in the center of the combat gym, her eyes scanning the space as if reading the air itself. Every sound, footsteps, the rustle of gear, the faint hum of fluorescent lights was amplified in her mind. Today was not a routine day. It would never be routine again. Lieutenant Commander Jason Rudd arrived with quiet precision. Every step he took exuded the controlled confidence of someone trained for the impossible. His uniform was crisp, his gear secured, and yet there was an edge about him, a hardness in his eyes that mirrored Elise's own. But behind it was history, memory, guilt, and betrayal. "Morning," he said, voice calm but deliberate. His eyes flicked over her, lingering for a fraction too long. "You look like hell." Elise's lips pressed into a thin line. "And you look like trouble." A tension hung between them, thicker than the reinforced mats beneath their boots. Neither had forgotten Kabul. Neither had forgiven, and yet they had a mission, a shared enemy, and somewhere deep down, Elise knew she couldn't do this alone. Carver's orders were clear: train together, neutralize Spectre, and uncover the truth behind the betrayal that had destroyed their team. But training with Jason meant revisiting every memory she had tried to suppress, every scar she had hidden from the world. The instructor blew the whistle. "Hand-to-hand evaluation. Begin." Jason lunged first. His moves were precise, aggressive, but expected. Elise slipped past him, deflecting and redirecting with lethal efficiency. He countered, rolling, striking, testing her defenses. Every motion was a conversation, a battle of wits and instinct. Neither held back. "You're holding back," Jason growled, his eyes flashing with both frustration and admiration. "Show me what you've got." Elise's body moved like lightning. She swept his leg, forced a counter-roll, parried his strike, and pinned him with a knee to the spine. "Tap," she ordered, voice cold and unwavering. "No," he snarled, refusing. Her pressure increased. She was calm, controlled, but every strike, every motion carried the weight of her past. "Tap," she repeated. Still he refused. Finally, Elise released him, spinning him across the mat with force that made the room gasp. He came up on one knee, chest heaving, eyes locked on hers. "You think I abandoned you?" he shouted. "I did." Elise's hands dropped to her sides, fists tight. "Prove it." Jason reached into his bag and pulled out a flash drive. The metallic glint reflected the overhead lights, but it held more than metal. It held secrets, answers, and the potential to unravel everything Elise had believed about the past. "This contains encrypted files from our old handler," he said, voice low. "Intel that was supposed to be destroyed. I recovered it 2 months ago. It implicates someone in our unit, Inspector's escape." Elise's pulse quickened. "Who?" she demanded, eyes narrowing. Jason hesitated. "I can't say here, too many ears, too many eyes." A chill crawled down Elise's spine. The betrayal had always been close, too close. And if Jason's intel was correct, the traitor could still be active, still in uniform, still watching. "You want me to trust you?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Jason's jaw tightened. "I don't expect trust, I expect action. And right now action means we meet tonight, off base, alone." Elise's instincts screamed at her to refuse. Every fiber of her being urged her not to walk into a potential trap. But the need for answers, the need to finally understand what had happened in Kabul, overrode caution. She agreed quietly, without a word. As she prepared for the meeting, memories clawed at her relentlessly. The alley in Kabul, the explosion that consumed her team, the radio call she had made in desperation, the orders that had resulted in chaos, the absence of Jason, and Spectre, always Spectre. Hours later, under a dim streetlight in a deserted parking lot, Elise arrived. The world was silent except for the faint hum of distant traffic and the occasional flicker of neon lights from nearby signs. She stayed in the shadows, alert, her sidearm ready, every sense heightened. Jason's car pulled up slowly. He exited, hands visible, and froze when he saw her. There was a tension in his posture, a combination of relief and caution. "Elise," he said quietly. She didn't move, didn't lower her guard. "Where?" "The flash drive." He reached into his coat and handed it over. "It contains everything, but you need to see it in a secure location, not here." Her mind raced. Every instinct told her this was dangerous, that Spectre's operatives could be anywhere. And then it happened, a soft click, a shadow shifting. Gunfire tore through the night. Sniper rounds sliced the air. Sparks flew as bullets shredded metal. Jason reacted instinctively, lunging toward her, pulling her behind a concrete pillar. Her pulse hammered as adrenaline surged. "They found us," he shouted. Elise's mind went into combat mode. She scanned the environment, calculated angles, assessed threats. Each movement was precise, controlled, lethal. Jason shoved her toward the sedan. "Get inside, now." Her instincts screamed to stay, to fight, to protect. But she knew the odds were against them. Survival came first. The black SUV parked nearby roared to life. Masked operatives jumped out with coordinated precision. Elise's heart thundered. She pressed herself low, weapon ready, every muscle taut with anticipation. Jason shouted over the chaos. "You need to see this. Everything you thought you knew about Kabul, it's about to change." She swallowed hard. The shadows of her past had found her, tangible and immediate. And the truth, whatever it was, lay on that flash drive in Jason's hands, waiting to shatter everything she believed. Inside the car, with engines running and danger closing in from all sides, Elise finally allowed herself a breath, not of relief, but of recognition. This was only the beginning. Because Spectre was alive, the traitor was still out there, and the web of betrayal, lies, and survival was far more complex than she had ever imagined. And now she would have to face it all with Jason, her former ally, and perhaps the only person who could help her uncover the truth. The sun had barely risen over the horizon when Elise and Jason arrived at the safe house on the outskirts of D.C. The building was nondescript, brick walls faded by decades of weather, windows shuttered, and a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. From the outside, it looked like any abandoned warehouse. But inside, it was a command center, a war room, and a trap all rolled into one. Elise stepped inside, her eyes immediately scanning the space. Walls lined with monitors flickered, displaying satellite feeds, street cameras, and the digital pulse of the city. The hum of computers filled the air, punctuated by the soft clicks of keyboards. Jason moved beside her, carrying a laptop and the flash drive. "This is where we start," he said quietly. "Everything Spectre left behind, everything we need to understand, it's here." Elise didn't answer. She was too busy observing, noting every shadow, every angle, every potential threat. Her training, instincts, and years in Tier 1 dictated that she treat this room as if it were a battlefield. Jason plugged in the flash drive. Files, videos, encrypted messages, and maps scrolled across the screen. Her eyes widened as she absorbed the scope of what she was seeing. Operatives moving across the city. Tier 3 mercenaries, not military trained but lethal, coordinated, and ruthless. And hints of a mole, someone inside their ranks who had orchestrated the chaos in Kabul. Elise's jaw tightened. "So the past isn't finished," she said, voice low, controlled. "It's waiting for us here." Jason nodded. "And it's worse than we thought. Spectre's planning something big, something that could destabilize everything we've worked to protect." Her pulse quickened. The tension in the room was palpable, charged with adrenaline and anticipation. Every memory of Kabul, the explosion, the betrayal, the loss of her team, raced back in fragments. And yet there was clarity now, a dangerous clarity. The mission wasn't just about survival. It was about justice, about closing a circle that had been left open for too long. Suddenly, a warning ping sounded from one of the monitors. Elise's eyes flicked to the screen, narrowing. Multiple operatives had been detected moving through an abandoned warehouse near the Potomac. Their formations were coordinated, their weapons lethal. Spectre's signature. Jason looked at her, tension in his jaw. "We need to move, now." Elise didn't respond verbally. She simply grabbed her gear, every movement deliberate, controlled, precise. Her mind raced with strategies, contingencies, and exit routes. Every instinct screamed at her to anticipate the enemy's moves before they even happened. As they approached the warehouse, the streets were eerily quiet. Shadows clung to alleys, and the faint hum of distant traffic masked their movements. Elise led the way, senses heightened, every step calculated. Jason followed closely, his presence both a comfort and a reminder of unresolved tension. They reached the warehouse. Elise pressed herself against the wall, scanning for entry points, noting patterns of light and shadow, the rhythm of guard patrols. Jason observed quietly beside her, waiting for her signal. She whispered, "We go in." Silent, lethal, no mistakes. Inside, the warehouse was a labyrinth of crates, shadows, and echoes. Operatives moved with precision, unaware of the two figures silently observing from the darkness. Elise signaled Jason, and they split, moving like shadows themselves, positioning to strike simultaneously. The first operative turned a corner. Elise's movement was instantaneous. She struck, disabling him silently, her training precise and deadly. Jason followed suit, neutralizing another with swift efficiency. Their movements were synchronized, a deadly dance honed from years of shared history, instinct, and the unspoken understanding that failure wasn't an option. But the deeper they moved into the warehouse, the more complex the situation became. Operatives were no longer isolated. They were coordinated, communicating with subtle gestures and encrypted radios. Elise's mind raced, analyzing every movement, every shadow, predicting the next strike before it came. Jason covered her flank, his presence steady, reassuring, and yet the tension between them remained unresolved. Every glance, every motion carried layers of history, trust, betrayal, admiration, and anger. And in this moment there was no room for hesitation. Suddenly, a door at the far end of the warehouse burst open. More operatives poured in, weapons raised, forming a barricade. Elise's heart pounded, but her focus was razor-sharp. She analyzed their formation, predicting weaknesses, opportunities, and escape routes. Jason whispered, "2 paths, left or right. We can split them." Elise nodded subtly. "Right, I'll take the lead, cover me." The firefight was brief, precise, and brutal. Bullets shredded the air, but Elise and Jason moved with deadly efficiency, disabling operatives with calculated force. Every motion was a balance of precision and instinct, honed from years of survival under conditions most could never imagine. Finally, they reached a secured office at the back. Elise kicked the door open. Inside, a computer terminal blinked. Maps, communication logs, and files, Spectre's plans laid bare. Her stomach tightened. This was it. The culmination of years of pursuit, betrayal, and loss. And yet lurking beneath the relief was a cold, insistent thought. Spectre was here. He was watching, and the real danger hadn't even arrived yet. Jason approached, pointing at the terminal. "Everything we need is here, but we're not safe. He knows we're here. He's always 3 steps ahead." Elise's eyes narrowed. "Then we finish this, now." As they began downloading the files, a subtle movement in the shadows caught Elise's attention. Her pulse quickened. A figure, tall, menacing, impossible to identify in the dim light, emerged from the far corner. "Spectre," she whispered, recognizing the posture, the aura, the presence she had feared for years. The operative before her was only a decoy, but the message was clear. He was alive, orchestrating every move, pulling strings from the shadows. Elise's fists tightened. Years of training, survival, and strategy culminated in that moment. This was no longer just a mission, it was personal. Every loss, every betrayal, every life sacrificed weighed on her. And now, the reckoning was at hand. Jason glanced at her. "You ready?" Her eyes, cold, lethal, and unwavering, met his. "I've been ready my entire life." Outside the warehouse, the city moved obliviously, unaware of the storm brewing in the shadows. Inside, Elise and Jason prepared for the confrontation that would define the next chapter of their lives, where survival, truth, and vengeance would collide. And somewhere in the darkness, Spectre watched, calculating, waiting, knowing that the hunt had truly begun. The countdown had started, and there was no turning back. The warehouse was quiet for a moment, the hum of the computers and distant city noises the only sound. But Elise's instincts screamed that the quiet was a trap. Every muscle in her body was taut, every sense heightened. She and Jason had prepared for this moment, yet nothing could fully prepare her for facing Spectre, alive, orchestrating chaos and watching from the shadows. "Elise," Jason whispered, his voice low and steady, "he's here. I can feel it." She didn't respond immediately. Her eyes scanned the room, every shadow, every corner, every possible vantage point. The flash drive in her pocket burned against her thigh, a lifeline of intel, proof, and secrets. But right now, the threat was immediate, tangible, and lethal. A soft click echoed across the room. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Elise froze mid-breath. Her body reacted before her mind could. Every step, every reflex honed through years of Tier 1 training kicked in. "Split," she whispered to Jason, and in perfect synchronicity, they moved, 2 shadows merging with the darkness, circling toward the source of the noise. From the far corner, a figure emerged, tall, menacing, cloaked in black tactical gear. The mask concealed the face, but Elise knew immediately who it was. Spectre. The same posture, the same lethal aura she had feared for years. Her pulse accelerated. Memories of Kabul, the explosion, the betrayal, the loss of her team, flooded her senses. She could almost hear the screams, feel the heat of the dust, smell the gunpowder. "You've been busy," Elise said, her voice calm, but every word carried the weight of controlled fury. Spectre didn't respond. He simply stepped forward, each movement deliberate, predatory. "Elise Hartman," he said, voice smooth, controlled, carrying a cold menace. "I wondered when we would meet again." Jason moved beside her, positioning himself as backup, but not too close. He knew her limits and he knew her past, what she could handle alone. "We end this now," he said firmly. Spectre tilted his head, considering them, analyzing every micro-expression. End it, or begin something far greater. Before Elise could react, a sudden noise behind her drew her attention. Operatives, masked, coordinated, and armed, emerged from hidden exits. They formed a perimeter, cutting off escape. Elise's heart pounded. This wasn't just a confrontation. It was a trap designed to test her, to isolate her, to force a direct encounter with Spectre. Her mind raced, calculating odds, potential outcomes, weaknesses. Jason whispered urgently, "We need to move. Split them, neutralize, and get Spectre." Elise interrupted, her voice cold and commanding, "No, we confront him now." Time seemed to slow. Every movement, every decision, every breath carried life-or-death consequences. She analyzed the operatives' positions, their angles, their intent. With precise coordination, she and Jason moved. Every strike was calculated, every motion lethal. Operatives fell silently, incapacitated before they could react. Spectre observed, a predator enjoying the dance of his prey, but Elise was no ordinary prey. She had survived impossible odds before. She had mastered life-and-death moments. And now her skills, training, and instincts converged. Finally, after neutralizing the last operative, only Spectre remained. The room was charged with tension, silence punctuated only by the hum of computers and distant city noise. Elise stepped forward. "This ends tonight," she said. Spectre tilted his head, a smirk apparent in the curve of his voice, even behind the mask. "Tonight? Oh, Elise, we've only just begun." He lunged suddenly, moving faster than expected, and Elise countered instinctively, sidestepping, redirecting his energy. Their movements were a deadly dance, fluid and precise. Each strike, block, and maneuver carried the weight of years of preparation, training, and survival instincts. Jason watched closely, ready to intervene, but he knew Elise could handle this. She had survived worse than Spectre. She had endured the loss of her team, betrayal from within, and the chaos of war. This was merely another test of her skill, her resolve, her ability to survive. Elise's strikes were precise, calculated, almost effortless. Spectre countered, anticipating her moves, but she adapted, flowing like water, striking where he least expected. The intensity of their combat was breathtaking, each movement telling a story of past battles, shared histories, and unresolved conflict. Finally, she landed a decisive move, pinning him to the ground, her knee against his chest, weapon drawn and aimed at his head. "Enough," she said, her voice cold, lethal, unwavering. Spectre laughed softly, a sound devoid of warmth. "You've grown strong, but strength alone won't save you from the truth, Elise." Her pulse raced, but her focus remained. "Then speak it, quickly, or you die here." A tense silence followed, filled only by the labored breathing of two warriors at the peak of skill and determination. Spectre's eyes, visible just enough, glimmered with a mixture of respect and menace. "You think you know everything about Kabul," he said slowly, deliberately. "You survived, yes, but you never understood the betrayal, the manipulation, who orchestrated it from the shadows." Elise's eyes narrowed. Her mind raced. Every memory she had suppressed, every moment of doubt and guilt collided with the present. "Tell me," she demanded, every word sharp, precise. Spectre leaned back slightly, smirking. "It wasn't me, not entirely. There's someone in your unit, someone you trusted, someone who set the stage for everything that happened." Her breath caught. Jason stiffened beside her. The weight of the revelation settled over her like a physical force. She had suspected betrayal, but now it was tangible, immediate, and within reach. "Who?" she demanded. Spectre didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small device, a recorder. "Listen for yourself," he said, pressing play. A voice filled the room, familiar, authoritative, chilling. It was a recording of orders, decisions, manipulations, everyone orchestrated to ensure her team's demise. And the voice belonged to someone she had once trusted implicitly, someone within the military hierarchy, whose betrayal had remained hidden for years. Elise felt a cold fury rise within her. The weight of loss, guilt, and survival coalesced into a singular focus. She would not let this betrayal stand. She would confront the traitor. She would finish what had been left unfinished. Spectre watched her, a predatory glint in his eyes. "Now you understand," he said softly. "The game is bigger than you imagined, and the person you trusted the most is part of it." Elise's fists tightened, her resolve solidifying. "Then we finish this, not with words, not with hesitation, with action." Jason nodded beside her, his presence steady, a reminder that she was not alone in this battle. Together, they had survived impossible odds before. Together, they would face Spectre, the traitor, and the shadows of their past. Outside the warehouse, the city remained oblivious. Inside, history was being rewritten, alliances shattered, truths revealed, and a reckoning long overdue was finally at hand. The countdown had entered its final phase. And there would be no mercy. The first light of dawn cut through the haze of the city, streaking the streets with muted gold. Elise Hartman stood atop the abandoned parking garage, overlooking the location Jason had identified, the final piece of Spectre's network. The city below was unaware of the storm gathering above it, a storm Elise had been preparing for her entire life. The betrayal, the loss, the memories of Kabul, they all converged in that moment. Her team's faces flashed through her mind, every smile, every laugh, every life extinguished. And now the person responsible was within reach. Jason moved beside her, carrying tactical gear and the flash drive containing the intel that would expose the traitor. His eyes, sharp and unreadable, flicked to hers. "You ready?" he asked. Elise's jaw tightened. "I've been ready for this my whole life." They descended into the streets below, moving through shadows, silent and lethal. The operatives guarding the building were numerous, but Elise's focus was absolute. Every step, every movement, every breath was controlled, honed by years of survival and Tier 1 training. They reached the entrance. Elise signaled Jason, and they breached simultaneously. The room was dimly lit, filled with the hum of computers and the faint smell of electronics. The operatives guarding the building reacted instantly, but Elise and Jason moved with deadly precision, neutralizing threats before they could raise alarms. Then finally she saw him, the traitor. A figure in uniform, confident, calm, utterly composed despite the chaos around them. Elise's pulse quickened. Every instinct screamed at her. This was the person who had orchestrated the disaster in Kabul. This was the face she had learned to hate, even before knowing the full truth. "You," Elise said, her voice cold and unwavering. The traitor turned, eyes widening in recognition. "Captain Hartman," he said smoothly, voice calm, almost apologetic. "I suppose you figured it out." "I've known," Elise said, stepping closer, weapon trained steadily. "I just didn't know the full extent until now." Jason moved beside her, but it was Elise who had the focus, the determination, and the fire. Every memory of Kabul, every life lost, every betrayal fueled her resolve. You were willing to sacrifice them. My team, she said, voice rising with controlled fury. For what? The traitor smiled, a cold, calculating smile. For control, for power. You and your team were collateral in a game far bigger than any of you could imagine. And you, Captain Hartman, you survived. That alone makes you dangerous. Elise's mind raced. Every tactic, every contingency she had planned, every maneuver she had practiced converged in that instant. There would be no mistakes, no hesitation. Without warning, the traitor lunged toward the console, attempting to destroy the data. Elise reacted instantly, her body a blur of motion, intercepting him with the precision of someone who had spent years mastering the impossible. The struggle was brief but intense, every movement a battle of strength, skill, and sheer will. Jason covered her flank, neutralizing the remaining operatives with efficiency born of experience. Together, they were unstoppable, a lethal combination of strategy, skill, and determination. Finally, Elise subdued the traitor, pressing her weapon firmly against his chest. Her eyes locked on his, and for the first time there was no hesitation, no doubt. "You're finished," she said, voice cold as steel. The traitor's eyes flickered with fear for the first time. "You think this ends here," he whispered. "You have no idea who else is watching, no idea how deep this goes." Elise didn't waver. "I'll find them and I'll finish it, one way or another." Jason stepped forward, securing the flash drive. "It's over for now," he said, voice calm but firm. Elise took a deep breath, letting the tension drain from her shoulders. The city outside remained oblivious, but inside justice had been served. Spectre's network was exposed, the traitor neutralized, and the truth finally revealed. Yet amidst the triumph, a heavy weight lingered. The memories of Kabul, the lives lost, the betrayal, these could never be undone. Elise felt the sting of guilt, the ache of grief, the burden of command. But for the first time in years there was also clarity, a sense of purpose reaffirmed. Jason placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did it," he said softly. "We did it." Elise's eyes met his. There was acknowledgement, understanding, and a shared history that needed no words. They had survived impossible odds, faced betrayal, and emerged victorious. But the cost was written in memory and scar tissue, in the lives lost and the scars carried silently. Outside, the sun rose higher, illuminating the city. Life went on, but Elise knew that the shadows would always linger, Spectre, the traitor, the ghosts of her team. She had faced them, defeated them, and exposed the truth. But survival was a journey, not a destination. As they left the safe house, Elise looked up at the skyline. The city was vast, sprawling, full of secrets. And somewhere beyond the reach of the law, beyond the safety of daylight, new threats would emerge. But she was ready. She had to be. Because Elise Hartman had learned that survival wasn't just about skill. It was about resilience, focus, and the courage to face the shadows within and without. And for the first time, she allowed herself a small, private acknowledgement. The mission was over, but she had endured. She had survived. And she would continue to fight, not just for herself, but for those she had lost and those who still depended on her. Jason glanced at her, reading the unspoken words in her eyes. "What now?" he asked. Elise's lips curved into a faint, determined smile. "We keep moving forward," she said. "The shadows never sleep, and neither can we." Together they walked into the sunlight, ready for whatever came next. The past had been confronted, the betrayal exposed, and the immediate threat neutralized. But Elise knew, as she had always known, that life in the shadows demanded vigilance, precision, and courage. And she was ready for all of it. The city sprawled before them, vast, indifferent, and alive. And in its streets and its shadows, the echoes of the past lingered. But Elise Hartman had faced them, conquered them, and emerged stronger. The mission was complete. But her story, was far from over.